Hi everyone. So this video is meant to really introduce you to the first sketchbook assignment and also to introduce you to the materials and how to use them. There are so many different ways to use these materials, but we're going to be using them across many different assignments that allow you to explore life drawing in a ton of different ways. This is a set of materials that I think will be really useful. However, if you have any favorite drawing materials, I encourage you to keep them on hand and occasionally bring them into the drawing processes that you're doing for your assignments. I really encourage y'all to explore and experiment and see what works best for you. That being said, I am going to show you some really cool ways of using materials that might be helpful for you. So for the class, you're going to need a big old mixed media or watercolor pad. This is what mine looks like. Yours might look very different. I recommend getting like a Canson brand one, which is nice and cheap. You can buy from a local art store. Mine has 100 sheets because I'm going to be doing a lot of demonstrations in here, as well as my own practice. But I recommend getting at least 50 sheets. You might want to just get a bigger one just to really be sure you're able to draw as much as you want. That being said, you can always get a second book if you run out of pages halfway through the course. So you'll need a big old mixed media or watercolor pad. It is important that you have a thicker paper, so just a drawing paper won't quite do, because we are going to be using some wet media as well as traditional drawing tools like pens and pencils. The first assignment, the first sketchbook assignment, asks you to treat 20 of your sketchbook pages in some way, using watercolor or tea or coffee. And this is really a technique that I like to do in order to get rid of that daunting white page feeling. So I've got my watercolor pad here. Maybe you have like that Himi gouache set. I know if some of y'all were in my painting class, you might have that, and that would work great for this, as well as for different drawing techniques throughout the course. But I'm going to really think about this first assignment of treating my pages just like I'm almost changing the color of the page. So I am not thinking about this as a drawing or a painting really yet. I'm not thinking about my marks as capturing an image yet, but instead the goal here is really just to treat and tone the page. So here you can see I dipped my big old brush into some brown and some blue, which together make kind of like a really nice chromatic gray. And I like there to be a little bit of variation. So I'm just kind of applying this really light wash over the entire page. And notice how much water I used. So it's really light. I'll be able to draw on top of this and use this as like the base layer for a drawing that I can really build up in order to get some high contrast darks and light tones. If I go a little bit too dark with my wash, so let's say I were to really dig into my watercolor or Himi set and get a little bit too dark too early on, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to build up a high contrast drawing on top of something that's as dark as this. That being said, it could still be a really nice sort of like low-key nocturnal looking drawing, but I really recommend for this process just at the beginning to keep your washes really light and transparent. So I can take a little bit of yellow and some dirty paint water, which helps to kind of neutralize it a bit. And I'm really just covering the entire page. You can also combine multiple colors. Maybe I want it to sort of shift from yellow to orange and create like a soft gradient. That can be a fun way of treating a page in a way that really just tones it so that when you draw on top, you have kind of like a nice base tone and color to respond to. This also just helps with that feeling of anxiety that I tend to get when I am sitting in front of a white page with a pen and I'm forced to make my first mark. It can be a little bit scary on a white sheet. So that's why we're toning we're toning 20 of our pieces of sketchbook paper with some kind of treatment. So you can use your watercolor or gouache set to do this, and make sure you're really watering it down so it gets nice and thin, transparent. It should be a very light wash. But you can also tone the pages that are on the back. So I can also tone this one. Another idea is I can take the wash that I've put here, and while it's still wet, I can flip it and I can kind of make a monotype print where, boom, that page is already treated for me. Another way that you can create some interesting textures when treating your pages is by taking a sheet of vellum, which is something that's on the supply list, and I can actually paint on my vellum. I want this to be kind of like a nice warm sunset-y tone. I can paint on the vellum, which is about the same size as my sketchbook paper. And notice how much water I'm using. I'm dunking my brush in water. It is important that you use a big enough brush as well. And now I can take that paper and I can press it onto my sketchbook page, and the wrinkles created in the vellum or the tracing paper create some really interesting textures. This can help to just create like a really interesting textural and tonal quality to the paint or to the paper that you're then going to draw on. So to be clear, these processes that you're doing to 20 of your pages are meant to be drawn on later. So later on, I'll be making figure drawings that will be overlapped and overlaid on top of what you're doing now. So you'll be using micron pens, pencils, felt tip pens, all on top of these treatments that you're applying right now. So it's important that when you're applying these treatments, that you're not too concerned about creating an image yet, because this is not the image necessarily, but this is just the background tone. So don't worry about kind of like the specific mark you're making. Think about it almost like you're painting a wall. You're just changing the color of the sheet of paper so that you have a little bit of something to respond to and to build up on that isn't quite as daunting as the white sheet of paper. It also just creates some interesting relationships when you draw on top of treated and toned papers. And this is also just a really fun way to make the sketchbook yours. It will give each page kind of like an emotional tone that you can then respond to. That can be really fun. It also will help you to hopefully feel inspired in later stages. When you start a new assignment, you'll be able to open your notebook up to some kind of interesting color that maybe you had forgotten about. And you'll see interesting relationships start to emerge between the treatment that you did before and the way that you're interpreting your figure through your figure drawing assignment. But this is just a little introduction to this first sketchbook assignment and your materials. Your materials might look a little bit different than mine, and that's totally fine. Just let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.